Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Reading Quest. As you all know, Dostoevsky was a psychologist while Tolstoy was a sociologist, but today I'm going to talk about Tolstoy the psychologist and one of his greatest contribution to the subject of death and dying, that is, and also one of the most disturbing novels or short novella in existence, that is The Death of Ivan Ilyich. So the text is taken from Tolstoy's shorter fiction, published at Norton Critical Edition. And Tolstoy has contributed immensely by writing this Death of Ivan Ilyich to the genre of this particular subject, this particular theme, that is death and dying. It is an extraordinary contribution on the subject of death and dying. Death not as a sudden death, but as a slow, agonizing, painful death where the protagonist doesn't come to terms with the fact that he is dying until the very last moment of his life. So death is something, death and birth, the reason for that are quite very obvious, because death and birth are quite inexperienceable. And that is why this is one subject that has not been touched upon by almost all the writers, except a very, very select few, and Tolstoy's fiction is one such. So the protagonist is Ivan Ilyich, a comfortable, conventional man doing a conventional job, living a comfortable life. He gets the right kind of school, he gets the right kind of education, he gets the right kind of girl to marry with, he gets the right kind of job. But on one trivial instance of instructing one of his workers to how to hang the curtain and at which place to hang the curtain, he fell off the cliff, got himself injured due to minor injury, which turned into a fatal illness, and then that was, the reason for his death. But he couldn't accept this fact until very late in his life. So here death is portrayed as inch by inch progress, inch by inch progress. Here death is treated not as a closing or falling down of a curtain, rather traversing a long dark corridor. That is the beauty of Tolstoy's short novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And let me assure you that it is one of the most disturbing novels or novella in existence. So here I'd also like to incorporate some of the points written by an analyst called Y.J. Dayananda, published at, of course, the Norton Critical Edition. So there are 5 stages on which this patient, that is the protagonist as well, Ivan Ilyich, passes through while talking of while he experiences death. The first is denial and isolation, the second is anger, the third is bargaining, the fourth is depression, and the fifth is acceptance. Okay, and in The Death of Ivan Ilyich dies in the first page of the opening section, but then he goes through the 5 stages of dying in the remaining 11 sections. So it is one of the marvelous stroke of Tolstoy to make the epilogue, the prologue, and to portray death as an event or moment first, and then to portray dying as a process or a series of stages leading up to the event or moment when dying ends. So the first stage is, of course, denial and isolation, where the patient reacts to the bad news that it is not something that can happen to him, because the protagonist Ivan Ilyich has learned of a syllogism that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, hence Socrates is mortal. And now, as long as the premises are true, the conclusion is reached, but nonetheless it is an abstract man, Socrates, while Ivan Ilyich is a man living in flesh and blood. He has his own joys and sorrows, pain and suffering. He is not an abstract man like Socrates, and therefore he may someday go through the process of dying, but that cannot happen all of a sudden in the prime of his life, which nonetheless happens in the novel. And that makes the absurdity of the novel even more contrasting. So the first stage is denial, of course. The second stage is anger, that why it's me, why it is not somebody else. And the stage of anger is very difficult to cope with from the point of view of the family and staff. And then the third stage is bargaining. Yes, it is me, but the patient prays to God that, oh God, if you can give me one more year, I'll try to prove myself to be a better Christian. Sometimes a kind of mysterious arcane bargaining also goes behind the mind of the protagonist, that okay God, okay, I will donate a kidney, I'll donate a heart, okay, I'll donate some other part of my body organ in order to prove myself to be a better human being. I will try to follow the dictums of the scriptures and all that. Okay, so some kind of secret bargaining just to comfort oneself. You may call it ego defense mechanism by Sigmund Freud. Then the fourth stage is depression. And during this stage, the depression of Ivan Ilyich is very clearly portrayed, and Ivan Ilyich is wanting to be left alone. Most of the time, he lays staring back at the sofa, living only in the memories of his past. Okay, he becomes very impatient with his wife and her conventional words of comfort. And then in the fifth stage, acceptance comes, that thy will be done. Okay. And acceptance here should not be mistaken for a happy stage. It is almost devoid of feeling. Okay. So in the dying hour, somehow Ivan Ilyich concedes the fact that he is dying. He has made peace with himself. He just watches his own death in a very melancholic fashion, which he is slowly and slowly approaching, inevitably and inexorably towards death. So the way Tolstoy portrays it remains a very haunting portrayal of a man that is about to die. And I cannot think of any other parallel. Well, so on the subject of death and dying, taken up by a psychologist called Dr. Ross at University of Chicago, where he wrote a book on the subject of death and dying, and he experimented and he talked to a lot of patients having fatal illness, and he confirmed that all these people pass through these 5 stages only, okay, as portrayed by Tolstoy. And Dr. Ross quotes Tagore's line to describe this feeling of acceptance. I am quoting Dr. Ross' quote of Tagore: I bow to you all and take my departure. Here I give back the keys of my door, and I give up all claims to my house. Now the day has dawned, and the lamp that lit my dark corner is out, and summons has come, and I am ready for my journey. So Ivan Ilyich final stage of acceptance was not a stage of resignation, of defeat and bitterness, but of a calm victory bordering on ecstasy after a long and gallant battle. Also, I would like to quote one small excerpt from this passage given by Y.J. Dayananda, published at, of course, the Norton Critical Edition, that the study of dying, not as a biological but as a psychological event, as an experience, okay, can it tell us something about the treatment of death in literature? It should be clear from the reading of The Death of Ivan Ilyich, in the light of Dr. Ross on death and dying, that psychoanalysis offers a rich, dynamic approach to some aspect of literature. Tolstoy and Dr. Ross agree that the experience of death, however elusive, can be broken down into specifics. And those 5 specifics are, again repeat, denial, loneliness, anger, bargaining, and depression. And at the end, acceptance dawns in. So, Tolstoy's novella finally and minutely records the final moment of dying. It is not without purpose that Tolstoy calls his novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Admittedly, as many critics have seen, it is a savage satire on the hypocrisy of conventional life, but the stuff of novella is dying. What gives the novella its dread intensity is its sense of helplessness of mankind, which it conveys, especially when a man is coming face to face with death. And don't search for any parallel of this Tolstoy's novel, because again it will be an exercise in futility. You will end up in vain. There is no parallel that I could think of that exists. This is a singularly beautiful, although a very disturbing work in literature on the subject of death and dying. So kindly go for it. This should be your first contact point to start Tolstoy, as I believe. Thank you so much.